Leeloo Dallas, Multipass. The Fifth Element wasn't just a wild sci-fi blockbuster, it was chaos wrapped in neon, couture stitched into madness, and one of the most bizarre productions of the 1,990 seconds. What audiences saw was sleek, futuristic fun. What actually happened behind the scenes was a storm of studio fights, dangerous stunts, and clashing egos. From Bruce Willis's on-set frustrations to Milla Jovovich being pushed to her limits, to crew members threatening walkouts, this movie hid more than it revealed. Today, we're uncovering 20 dark secrets behind The Fifth Element that even die-hard fans don't know. And wait until you hear the bonus fact, it's a revelation that changes how you'll see the entire film. So strap in, because what you thought was just a sci-fi spectacle was really a battle zone behind the camera. Now, let's dive in. Bruce Willis didn't even want the role. At first, Bruce Willis wasn't interested in The Fifth Element. Director Luc Besson reportedly begged him after several actors turned it down. Jean Reno, Mel Gibson, and even Arnold Schwarzenegger were considered before Willis reluctantly agreed. Why reluctant? Because the script felt bizarre, and Willis wasn't sure a French director with limited Hollywood clout could handle a $90 million production. Insiders claimed Willis only signed on after studio pressure and a paycheck big enough to rival his die-hard salary. Ironically, his initial disinterest showed during production. Crew members recalled him openly complaining about the long shoot, sometimes refusing multiple takes. What audiences saw as effortless cool was, behind the scenes, a battle to keep Willis engaged. The truth? Willis nearly walked away more than once. The movie you know today almost lost its biggest star before cameras even rolled. Milla Jovovich's breakdown over Leeloo. Milla Jovovich wasn't Besson's first choice either. The role of Leeloo, half alien, half savior, was coveted by dozens of actresses. When Jovovich got the part, she was ecstatic, but the pressure nearly broke her. She had to master a made-up alien language, wear grueling costumes, and endure hours of body paint under hot lights. According to interviews, she burst into tears multiple times on set, feeling she was failing. Besson, who would later marry her briefly, pushed her harder, demanding perfection. The alien language? Besson and Jovovich rehearsed it obsessively until they could improvise conversations. The mental and physical strain left her exhausted. While fans remember Leeloo's orange hair and otherworldly presence, behind the scenes, Jovovich was crumbling under the weight of expectation. The truth? Her most iconic role almost destroyed her confidence before her career even began. Gary Oldman hated his own character. Gary Oldman's villain, Jean-Baptiste Emmanuel Zorg, is unforgettable southern drawl, plastic headpiece, bizarre mannerisms. But Oldman hated the role. He took it as a favor to Luc Besson, who had helped finance his film Nil by Mouth. According to Oldman, he never understood Zorg's motivations and considered the performance one of his weakest. It was rubbish, he admitted years later. On set, he reportedly mocked his own dialogue and joked that Zorg's costume looked like a rejected fish tank. Yet that flamboyance is what made Zorg memorable. The irony? A role Oldman dismissed became one of his most iconic. Behind the scenes, though, his lack of enthusiasm was palpable. Crew members whispered that Oldman often disappeared between takes, uninterested in the chaos around him. Fans see a colorful villain. Oldman saw a contractual obligation he wished he'd skipped. The Diva Plavalaguna opera nearly killed the singer. One of the film's most famous sequences is the Alien opera, sung by Diva Plavalaguna. The scene looks effortless, but behind it was agony. The soprano chosen, Inva Mula, struggled with the impossible vocal runs Besson demanded. The score was digitally altered because no human voice could realistically achieve all the notes in sequence. But filming the scene created physical danger. The towering costume, weighing over 70 pounds, made movement nearly impossible. The actress inside reportedly fainted twice from lack of air. Stagehands had to rush to loosen the headpiece so she wouldn't suffocate. To the audience, it's an ethereal performance. To the cast and crew, it was a near medical emergency that almost derailed the scene entirely. What audiences didn't know was that the unforgettable opera was born out of risk and exhaustion, not just artistry. The crew almost walked off set, filming in Pinewood Studios, London, and on massive Paris sound stages. The crew faced brutal working conditions. Production ran over schedule, call sheets stretched past 14-hour days, and tempers flared constantly. Many crew members, especially those not used to Besson's authoritarian directing style, threatened to quit. At one point, a full department walked out for a day in protest over pay disputes and safety concerns. Besson reportedly had to plead with studio executives to keep the project afloat. Crew gossip described The Fifth Element as organized chaos, with shouting matches, broken props, and constant rewrites. The futuristic world on screen masked a behind-the-scenes nightmare. The irony, the visual spectacle of the film relied on the very people who were ready to abandon it. Without last-minute negotiations, the film might never have been completed. Jean-Paul Gaultier's costumes nearly bankrupted the production. The futuristic costumes of The Fifth Element remain legendary, but few know they nearly sank the budget. Luc Besson hired avant-garde designer Jean-Paul Gaultier, who insisted on handcrafting over 900 costumes. Every extra, from background crowd members to airline staff, wore uniquely designed outfits. The price tag skyrocketed. Wardrobe costs ballooned into the millions, sparking panic from producers who feared they'd never recoup the expense. But Gaultier's vision was uncompromising. He even attended fittings personally, ensuring no detail was overlooked. The result? A fashion spectacle unlike anything seen in sci-fi before, yet behind the dazzling visuals was a production teetering on financial collapse. Crew members whispered that every dollar spent on fabric meant fewer resources for stunts and effects. The irony? What threatened to bankrupt the film also became one of its most celebrated elements, immortalizing its style forever. The taxi chase was a nightmare to shoot. That wild flying taxi chase with Bruce Willis weaving through futuristic skyscrapers, it looks seamless on screen, but filming it was a logistical nightmare. Early CGI in 1997 wasn't reliable, so the production combined miniature models, blue screen work, and physical rigs. Willis was strapped into a taxi cockpit mounted on hydraulics, jolted violently to simulate motion. Crew described it as bone-rattling. The models themselves were fragile, often shattering when too much pressure was applied. Reshoots dragged on for weeks. Technicians pulled overnight shifts to repair broken miniatures, some working 20 hours straight. Even worse, Willis reportedly grew impatient with the repetitive process, calling it painfully slow. What looks like an exhilarating chase was, in reality, a grueling technical puzzle. Every second of screen time came from months of painstaking and sometimes dangerous work with fragile models on the edge of collapse. Luc Besson's dictator reputation on set. Luc Besson envisioned The Fifth Element as his magnum opus, but his directing style turned toxic for some. Crew members described him as controlling, demanding, and unwilling to compromise. He reportedly screamed at technicians who questioned his choices and dismissed concerns about safety or practicality. According to insiders, Besson often rewrote scenes at the last minute, leaving departments scrambling. Some actors later hinted that working under him was suffocating. Gary Oldman allegedly said he felt like a puppet with no strings of his own. The tension trickled down, creating a set atmosphere so tense that even studio executives worried about mutiny. What audiences didn't know? The dazzling chaos on screen mirrored the emotional chaos behind it. Besson may have crafted a sci-fi classic, but he left behind bruised egos and burned-out crew members who swore never to work with him again. The alien language almost caused a casting walkout. The divine language spoken by Leeloo wasn't gibberish. It was a fully developed tongue with over 400 words created by Luc Besson himself. Milla Jovovich had to memorize it for long monologues, rehearsing daily until she could deliver it fluently. But Besson wanted other actors to respond to her alien speech realistically, leading to frustrations. Bruce Willis reportedly refused to rehearse certain scenes, saying it was like arguing with Martians. Tensions rose when producers worried the alien language would alienate audiences, demanding it be toned down. Besson fought back, insisting it was essential for authenticity. The standoff nearly derailed production until Willis relented. What audiences see as quirky world-building was, behind the curtain, a source of constant conflict. The truth? A language meant to unite the film's vision almost tore its cast and crew apart before it ever hit theaters. Bruce Willis's explosive clash with Besson. By the midpoint of filming, tensions between Bruce Willis and Luc Besson had exploded. Willis, already skeptical of the film's eccentric style, grew frustrated with endless takes and sudden rewrites. He allegedly shouted at Besson during one particularly long day, storming off set. Crew members thought he was quitting for good. Rumors swirled that Willis demanded a rewrite of his character to make him less of a futuristic cabbie and more of a traditional action hero. While Besson resisted, the studio intervened to smooth things over, terrified of losing their star. The fragile truce held, but barely. What fans saw as Willis's cool, detached performance was really the product of a bitter tug-of-war between actor and director. The truth? The entire production balanced on the razor's edge of Willis's patience. And before we get to the next fact, go ahead and like and subscribe, because if you think things were bad so far, wait until you hear how this movie nearly tore itself apart in post-production. The post-production editing war. Once filming wrapped, you'd think the chaos was over. Not even close. Post-production turned into a battlefield. Luc Besson delivered a cut that ran over 3 hours, stuffed with side plots and extended sequences. The studio panicked. They demanded massive cuts to make the film more marketable, fearing audiences wouldn't sit through such a sprawling epic. What followed was a brutal editing war. Besson clung to his vision, while Columbia Pictures executives brought in their own editors to trim it down. Some scenes were cut entirely whole, character arcs vanished. Insiders claimed Besson threatened to walk away when certain sequences were shortened, calling it sacrilege. The final product clocked in at just over 2 hours, sleek and stylish. But what audiences didn't know? Nearly an hour of footage was buried forever in vaults, casualties of a war between art and commerce, stunts that sent people to the hospital. The Fifth Element didn't rely entirely on CGI. Many action sequences involved real stunts, and the results were brutal. During the hotel shootout, stunt performers endured dangerous pyrotechnics and collapsing set pieces. One stuntman was reportedly hospitalized after a mistimed explosion hurled debris into his face. In the taxi crash scene, a rig malfunction nearly crushed a stunt double when the cockpit hydraulics jammed mid-drop. Safety supervisors pushed for pauses, but Besson allegedly insisted they keep rolling, arguing the intensity looked more real. Crew members whispered about a get-it-done-at-all-costs mentality. What ended up as thrilling spectacle on screen was built on broken bones and scars. Fans never saw the ambulance runs, the bruises, or the near misses. The truth? The line between movie magic and real danger was terrifyingly thin throughout production. A secret affair fueled on-set drama behind the camera. The set wasn't just tense, it was scandalous. Rumors swirled of Luc Besson becoming romantically involved with Milla Jovovich during production, despite being married at the time. Insiders claim the relationship created resentment among crew members, with whispers that Jovovich received special treatment or protection from Besson's infamous temper. Some actors reportedly bristled at how much attention was lavished on her compared to others. The alleged affair became so distracting that it overshadowed professional boundaries on set. Within a year of the film's release, Besson divorced and briefly married Jovovich, fueling speculation that the rumors had been true all along. What audiences didn't know? The luminous chemistry between director and star on-screen was born from real-life controversy off-screen, one that fractured working relationships and left lasting scars within the crew. The extras were exploited, those bustling, futuristic cityscapes full of aliens and civilians. They came at a human cost. Hundreds of extras were recruited in Paris and London. Many promised glamour and exposure. Instead, they endured grueling 14-hour days in sweltering costumes. Some wore heavy prosthetics with little ventilation, fainting under the lights. Pay disputes were common. Several extras claimed they never received the wages promised on their call sheets. Worse, complaints often went ignored, as producers brushed them aside to keep schedules on track. Behind the dazzling, alien-filled streets were exhausted, underpaid performers struggling to stay upright. For all the spectacle, the reality was exploitation. Fans see a colorful, living city, but the people who filled it, they remembered it as misery, bruised by the weight of costumes and the feeling of being treated as disposable. The cult fear around release. Before its release, Columbia Pictures feared The Fifth Element would flop. Executives considered it too European, too eccentric for American audiences. The film's fashion, humor, and pacing felt closer to a cult art project than a Hollywood blockbuster. Marketing teams struggled to sell it, unsure whether to emphasize Bruce Willis's action star appeal or Milla Jovovich's alien mystery. Some even suggested burying the release overseas, minimizing U.S. exposure. But word of mouth saved it. Audiences embraced the weirdness, and box office numbers soared past $260 million globally. Ironically, the very elements executives feared would alienate moviegoers. Its wild costumes, eccentric tone, and outrageous performances became the reasons it's still remembered today. What audiences didn't know? The Fifth Element was almost shelved as a risky oddity instead of the cult classic it ultimately became. Bruce Willis's contract nearly sank the budget. Bruce Willis didn't just command top billing, he commanded a paycheck so massive it almost derailed financing. At the time, Willis was one of Hollywood's highest-paid stars, and his contract reportedly included a huge salary plus profit participation. Insiders say Columbia Pictures hesitated, fearing the movie's bizarre French sensibility couldn't support such a star-driven price tag. But Luc Besson insisted he needed Willis to secure global distribution. The gamble strained the budget, forcing cutbacks in other areas. Sets were recycled, crew wages trimmed, and effects teams pressured to deliver more for less. Ironically, Willis himself didn't always seem fully committed, leading to tension over whether his paycheck was justified. What audiences didn't know? The film's financial survival hinged on one actor's name, even as his enthusiasm for the project wavered behind the scenes. The monster suits were literal torture. The hulking Mangalores, the alien mercenaries with grotesque faces, were created using heavy latex suits and animatronic masks. They looked incredible on screen, but inside, stunt actors suffered. The suits trapped heat, caused dehydration, and made breathing difficult. Some performers wore ice packs under their costumes just to stay conscious. Others reported losing several pounds of water weight in a single day. Communication was nearly impossible. Actors had to rely on hand signals when they couldn't speak through the masks. During fight sequences, visibility was so limited that stuntmen regularly collided, leaving bruises and sprains. What audiences saw as menacing alien warriors was, for the actors inside, a grueling endurance test. The truth? Each scene featuring the Mangalores came at a painful physical cost for those trapped beneath the rubber and wires. Columbia Pictures didn't trust Luc Besson. Even as cameras rolled, Columbia Pictures executives doubted Luc Besson could deliver a coherent blockbuster. They sent representatives to watch dailies, often second-guessing his creative decisions. Studio notes piled up, demanding more action, less alien dialogue, and tighter pacing. Besson bristled, refusing to compromise his vision. At one point, executives considered bringing in another filmmaker to advise him, essentially a babysitter. The tension grew so intense that producers described meetings as shouting matches. Besson ultimately won out, but not without scars. His stubbornness preserved the film's unique style, but left studio heads furious at his defiance. What audiences didn't know: The Fifth Element was a constant tug-of-war between a French auteur and nervous American backers who thought his vision was just too weird to succeed. Critics savaged it at first today. The Fifth Element is hailed as a cult masterpiece, but when it first premiered at Cannes in 1997, critics tore it apart. Reviewers slammed it as incoherent, overdesigned, and shallow. Some mocked it as Eurotrash in space. The hostile reception humiliated Besson, who had dreamed of winning critical respect alongside box office success. For weeks, American reviews were mixed at best. Many dismissed it as style over substance. What saved the movie wasn't critics, but fans. Audiences embraced the weirdness, giving it staying power that reviews couldn't kill. Over time, perceptions shifted, and its reputation grew. The irony? A movie once derided as nonsense now sits among the most iconic sci-fi films of the 1,990 seconds. Behind the applause today lies a forgotten truth. The Fifth Element began its life buried under ridicule. The set fire that almost shut everything down. Near the end of production, disaster struck. A fire reportedly broke out on one of the Paris sound stages, destroying props and threatening to delay the shoot indefinitely. Flames spread through constructed cityscapes, forcing an emergency evacuation of cast and crew. Firefighters battled for hours to contain it. Miraculously, no one was seriously hurt, but the damage was extensive. Insurance covered part of the loss, yet the incident left everyone shaken. For days, production halted while crews rebuilt what had been lost. The near catastrophe added millions to the budget and weeks to the schedule. What audiences didn't know: the futuristic world of The Fifth Element almost went up in smoke, literally. Without quick intervention, the film could have ended not in theaters, but in ashes. The film began as a teenager's notebook, the wildest secret of all. The Fifth Element was born from Luc Besson's teenage daydreams. As a 6-year-old growing up in France, he began sketching futuristic cities and alien characters in a notebook. He spent decades expanding the world, long before Hollywood considered it viable. By the time cameras rolled, Besson had been developing the story for over 20 years. That's why the film feels so wildly different. It wasn't born from a studio pitch, but from the imagination of a kid who never let go of his drawings. What audiences didn't know is that behind the chaos, scandals, and fights stood the persistence of a boy's dream. The irony? The very film that almost destroyed its creator's reputation was also the one he'd been building his entire life. The Fifth Element wasn't just a sci-fi romp, it was a battlefield of egos, bruises, bankrupt budgets, and teenage dreams colliding with Hollywood reality. For every dazzling shot on screen, there were tears, fights, and near disasters behind the camera. And yet, out of that chaos came a film that outlived its critics, outshined its flaws, and carved its place as a cult phenomenon. So, the next time you watch Leeloo whisper multi-pass, remember, it wasn't just a line. It was the sound of a production that survived fire, fury, and heartbreak to deliver one of the strangest, boldest sci-fi visions ever made. If you enjoyed uncovering these dark secrets, hit like, subscribe, and share because the truth about Hollywood is always stranger than fiction.